The subject for today is the legacy of African liberation. I'm going to ask a question I've asked before, but I just want to be sure that y'all are still with me. Y'all are not tired of hearing about African liberation, are you? No. All right. One more time. Let's hear that again. Y'all, how are you feeling about hearing about African liberation? Okay. Before going into the message, so that you will understand the subject, the legacy of African liberation, let me be sure that you are clear on the meaning of the word legacy. The word legacy means something handed down from one to another. Something bequeathed or bestowed upon another as from one's ancestors. That's deep. Because with that meaning, with that understanding in mind, I understand a little bit better why I'm in the position that I'm in. Because if legacy means to be handed down from one person to another as from your ancestors, I look at what's going on in my life and I see that what's going on in me and in my ministry is really the same spirit, just a different face of liberation. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In 1831, there was a preacher known as the Black Prophet. All right. Now check this out. This preacher taught himself how to read. He studied the Bible. He fasted and prayed. And one day, he declared that he was told in a vision to organize a revolt and kill all the white slave masters. So he and his followers went from plantation to plantation, killing every slave-holding family that they could find. That's a good preacher. Well, he was called the Black Prophet. In addition to this, they recruited slaves who knew they were slaves. Did y'all hear how I said that? They recruited slaves who knew that they were slaves at every plantation that they went to. This preacher's movement began to grow very fast. The countryside became paralyzed with terror for 36 hours as this organized army of slaves stalked through the countryside. Everywhere they went, they brought vengeance and retribution on their former slave masters. Again, this was a preacher. It was because of this black preacher. Now, I don't know how many of y'all have ever heard this before. Yes. But it was because of this black preacher and the revolt that he organized that the slave patrols that I told you about last week which is now today called the police department, came into existence. The slave patrols caught up with these freedom fighters and forced them to scatter and hide. There was a nationwide panic during the 6 weeks. Isn't that deep? For 6 weeks, white folk were in a nationwide panic because they didn't know where these folk were. For 6 weeks. While these freedom fighters were at large. When the black prophet was finally captured, needless to say, they gave him a swift trial and executed him immediately. This preacher, who was known as the black prophet, was a man called Nat Turner. How many of y'all have heard of Nat Turner before? The rise of Nat Turner represented every slaveholder's nightmare. As a result of Nat Turner's ministry of liberation, they actually passed laws to ensure that such a resistance would never happen again. Nat Turner's movement led to the passage of laws that prohibited teaching black folk how to read. Come on, preacher. All right. Not only that, but the laws also forbade black folk from reading the Bible. Why was that? Because men and women such as Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Harriet Tubman, these warriors used the Bible and their strong faith in God as inspiration to fight against oppression and racism. Slave owners began to realize that the Bible in the hands of an educated black man was a dangerous weapon. Therefore, they passed laws, follow this people, because of brothers like the black prophet, Denmark Vesey. They actually passed laws that all preachers had to be selected and approved by white folk. Say that again, Pastor. Are you following this thing? And not only did they have to be approved by white folk, but when blacks would gather, a white monitor had to sit in the congregation to make sure that the preacher wasn't saying something outside of what they wanted him to say. Guess what, y'all? It's still going on today. Of course, it's not as, we don't have whites sitting up in black congregations now because they programmed us. By the time we get out of their Bible colleges, by the time we get ordained after passing and answering the questions the way they want us to answer the questions, they feel that we're safe. That's deep. There was a man, when I say the same spirit, just a different face, sometimes I wonder when I look at what God is doing in my life, if this man's spirit has risen up in me. And that is a man called Marcus Garvey. Here's a brother. One of the most dangerous threats resistance to white supremacy was the rise of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey, brothers and sisters, had a vision.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yes. Both local and global. Yes. And he identified the root of the problem of black powerlessness. Garvey felt that the loss of the identity of the African, as well as the loss of the economic control of Africa, is what caused the greatest problems for black folk. And I'll be totally honest with you, I agree with him 100%. Because my brothers and sisters, when you don't know who you are, you are one powerless, melaninated human being. No one advocated independence for black folk like Marcus Garvey did. Garvey's fame had surpassed any other black man or woman during his time. And check this out, because the brother had a vision, other black leaders became his major opposition. Why was that? Because they wanted the title of being the Negro leader. Garvey's work became so effective that even those people who worked right by his side sabotaged his efforts for liberation. Let me tell you a little bit about this brother. Marcus Garvey. Now I know some who have been programmed, you honestly think that the only person you're supposed to hear about on Sunday morning is Jesus. I know that. But let me tell y'all something. If you can take listening to stories about the life of a man who supposedly existed more than 2,000 years ago, who you can't prove existed, you ought not to have a problem with me telling you about a man who we know existed and was a major force in the African consciousness of African people. Marcus Garvey had established an organization known as the United Negro Improvement Association. How many of y'all remember reading about that or know that in your history? All right, let me tell y'all about this. This organization was so effective in raising the consciousness of Africans in America that the Europeans went and created another organization just to cancel out the work of Garvey's organization. In 1909, a Jew by the name of Jacob Schiff was so angry about Garvey's work in raising the consciousness of black folk that he went and started an organization called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. We call it the NAACP. See, let me tell you the history here, brothers and sisters. So here's this other organization started in 1909 by a Jew for the sole purpose of neutralizing, by dividing black folk, Garvey's organization. Y'all understand what I'm saying? What they did 1 year later, not even a whole year later, a few months later, in May of 1910, these white officers of the NAACP handpicked a mulatto named W.E.B. Du Bois. Y'all don't mind this history today, do you? mulatto named W.E.B. Du Bois and made him the director of publicity and research. He was the only black officer in the NAACP. Now, whereas the NAACP did back then, and even today, it uses its influence to speak out against lynchings and injustices and lawlessness. The NAACP, which was comprised of mulattoes. See, y'all need to understand this. See, what they did is the children of the white slave masters, these men who had raped their black slaves, had mulatto children, and they didn't fit in with the white folk, and they didn't fit in with the slaves either. So that was one of the major reasons also of creating the NAACP, to be an association of colored people, not black people, colored people. So the NAACP fought for full integration and acceptance into the white mainstream. Whereas Garvey's organization, the United Negro Improvement Association, on the other hand, had as its goal the establishment of a separate power base for Africans in America. Let me tell you, this brother is so awesome. He even began to organize a military force. Did y'all hear what I said? Garvey, I wish I could holler this thing like I want to. Garvey organized a military force known as the Universal African Legion. Now tell me he wasn't bad. See, Garvey understood that it doesn't make sense to try to acquire anything if you don't have the power in place to protect it after you acquire it. Do y'all understand this? Yes. Garvey even organized an organization called the Black Cross Nurses. I didn't say Red Cross. I said Black Cross Nurses. He didn't stop there, brothers and sisters. The man also formed an organization called the Universal African Motor Corporation to have their own transportation. Guess what else? Man wanted to have his own airlines. Marcus Garvey formed an organization called the Black Eagle Flying Corps. Yes, yes. Now tell me the brother didn't have a plan. Yes. Marcus Garvey had a plan for economic empowerment based on the universal concept of black nationalism. Now don't let me scare you with that, because see, the media has done such a job in our minds that when you hear the word nationalist, right off the bat you think violence. Yes. You think militant and danger. I'm a black nationalist. I'm going to tell y'all straight up like it is, so that you'll understand and be clear on what that is. Look at me. What color am I? Black. Thank you. That's the first part of the definition right there. I'm clear on what I am. Now, what does it mean to be a nationalist? A nationalist means that you focus your energies and your attention on getting your house in order before trying to get somebody else's house in order. What I'm simply letting y'all know, brothers and sisters, is real simple. God didn't send me into all the world to preach the gospel to every creature. Not Ray Hagins, he didn't. God sent Ray Hagins to his people. You understand? together, which I really think is going to take my lifetime and maybe my grandchildren's and their children's lifetime, then I'll worry about somebody else. In the meantime, look at the person next to you and say, we got work to do. Garvey's leadership, under his leadership, y'all, hundreds of thousands of black people who had been disillusioned and victimized by the devices of slavery and racism began to find self-esteem and rebuild their lives. Well, guess what, y'all? Because Garvey was having that kind of effect, he had to be stopped. Let's talk about this man's downfall. Man didn't do nothing wrong.
Nothing.
Not a thing. Garvey's downfall came as the result of the spirit of opposition. Everybody say the spirit of opposition.
Spirit of opposition.
Now let me show you how this works. The spirit of opposition was manifested through other black religious and civic leaders. Who did I just say?
Black religious and civic leaders.
Yes. Black newspaper publishers accused Garvey of being insincere. They started printing stuff saying he ain't for real. Other black religious leaders would stand in their pulpits and say that Garvey was an imposter. Other leaders in the community began to spread the mess around that Garvey was a self-centered leader with a hidden agenda. Guess what, y'all? That same spirit is going on right now today. When God sends a liberator, the devil got to use somebody. Look at the person next to you and realize that you might be talking to the one the devil is using. And say, the devil gotta use somebody. Now I was just watching to see which ones of y'all was gonna say something. I'll say it again since you wouldn't say it. The devil gotta use somebody, so he might as well use you. If the same spirit can rise up in you to say the leader is self-centered and got a hidden agenda, the same spirit that opposed Marcus Garvey can rise up in you and say, child, he ain't for real. I'll tell you. Black religious and civic leaders use their platform to attack the followers of Marcus Garvey. No, let me tell you what they'd say. They'd say this, that and I quote, the followers of Garvey are of the most primitive and ignorant element of West Indian and American Negroes. What's really deep, people, is these same leaders stood in their pulpits and platforms and promoted the NAACP. And claimed that the members of the NAACP, who were mulattoes, and I quote them, said, well, these people are intelligent and respectable. There's a book entitled Race First. It's about the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and it was written by a man named Tony Martin. On page 89 of this book, Martin quotes Marcus Garvey, and this is Marcus Garvey's words. The white man, quoting quoting now Marcus Garvey, has succeeded in subduing the world by forcing everybody to think his way. He has given to the world, from the Bible to his yellow newspaper sheet, a literature that establishes his right and sovereignty to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. Y'all listening to this?
Yes, yes.
He goes on to state, the white man's propaganda has made him master of the world. And all those who have come in contact with it and accepted his propaganda have become his slaves. The Universal Negro Improvement Association is now calling upon the 400 million members of our race to discard the psychology of all other peoples and to advance our own. End of quote. That's what Brother Marcus Garvey said. Garvey was so awesome. He began to make use of the printed page. They didn't have radio back then. They didn't have cable television back then. So he began to use the media to awaken the consciousness of Africans in America. And he was having such an awesome effect on the people that the federal government stepped in. Look at the person next to you and say, he who fails to remember history, is doomed to repeat it. Did y'all hear that?
Yes.
Now, I'm telling you about this because it's going on now.
Yes.
Today. And I was doing the research on this thing, I said, man, now is this what you call a repeat or what? The government stepped in and came down on him, charging him with fraud. How did that happen? Man ain't done nothing wrong. The NAACP, as well as several black publishers who didn't like Garvey because of the truth that he spoke about them, aided in his demise. They began to publish stories about the financial problems surrounding his organization and claimed that he had taken money under false pretenses. Black people who were agents in disguise.
Yeah.
Look at the person next to you and say, they ain't gonna send a white person up in here. Did y'all hear what I said?
Yes.
Black people who were agents in disguise and people who Garvey trusted.
Yes.
Caused him to be convicted for mail fraud, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison in the year 1925. 2 years later, there was this president named Calvin Coolidge. I don't know how many of y'all remember President Calvin Coolidge. Maybe nobody here, I don't know. I don't know if anybody was around 1925. Yeah, of course. 2 years later, President Coolidge pardoned Marcus Garvey. But now follow this. The pardon had a stipulation attached to it. We'll pardon you, Mr. Garvey, on one condition and one condition only, and that is you leave the country. So when he got out of prison, he was deported to Jamaica. Here's the tragedy. Marcus Garvey died in 1940. And all of his work literally disintegrated into nothing. His awesome movement for African liberation had dropped dead. And what's really sad about it is the European history books don't talk about what I told you here today. Usually, when they do refer to Marcus Garvey, they refer to him as the man who led the failed Back to Africa movement. And they talk that failed Back to Africa movement so strong that as soon as we talk about returning to African consciousness, we don't want to hear it. Look at the person next to you and say, a lot of people have a need to be white. Oh yeah. You see, brothers and sisters, let me show you what I'm talking about. Garvey's movement, and brother Connor, William, right? William Connor, right?
Ricky Connor.
No. Brother William. Yeah. Carroll. Carroll, thank you. There's Connor over here. Okay. Brother Carroll, when he was having his remarks today, he said, I'm glad to be a part of this movement.
That's right.
That's what he said. He didn't say church. He said movement. And I thank you for that, brother. I'm glad that's how you see what we're trying to do here. Marcus Garvey's movement began to attain worldwide credibility. Now let me show you how awesome this brother was. His movement gained such credibility that the United States government created a census classification which caused many dark-skinned immigrants to stop identifying themselves as part of the black community.
All right.
Did y'all hear what I said? In case you missed it, the brothers' movement was so powerful that the United States government actually created a census classification so that people of African descent would not say that they were part of the black community. In fact, y'all, in 1923, follow this well, the United States Census Bureau declared that all Egyptians immigrating to America must classify themselves as white. Why Egyptians? Why not Libyans? Why not Ethiopians? Why not Sudanese? Why not Ghanaians, from people from Ghana? Why not Nigerians? Why only Egyptians? Why is it that the United States Congress deliberated just this past Wednesday of this week, legally classifying Egypt as in the Middle East instead of Africa? Why? Look at the person next to you and say, until you understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else you understand will only confuse you. The federal government's Office of Management and Budget determined racial classifications for the purpose of maintaining census records. There's a thing called Directive Number 15. Directive Number 15 is the code which designates racial identity. And every individual is placed in one of the following groups. Now when I read this, watch this, y'all. The first group is called American Indian. or Alaskan Native. Now, who are the people in this group? I'll tell you about their definition. American Indian or Alaskan Native is a person having origins in any of the original peoples of North America, or who maintains a cultural identification through tribal affiliation or community recognition. The next group is called white, not of Hispanic origin though. White folk, according to the Census Bureau, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. I had to take a walk on that. Read that again. According to the United States Census Bureau, white folk is a white person, by their definition, is a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe. Okay, we know that part. Right. But here's the one that blows my mind. North Africa or the Middle East. Black, what is their classification? Black is a person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. That's it. Asian or Pacific Islander is a person having origins in any of the original peoples of the Far East, Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, or the Pacific Islands. This includes, for example, China, Japan, Korea, the Philippine Islands, and Samoa.
Yes, yes.
And of course, the last category is Hispanic. A Hispanic person, by their definition, is a person of Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Central or South America, or any other Spanish culture or origin. Then they put here, regardless of race. Now ask yourself the question, brothers and sisters. Since North Africans and Middle Easterners have dark skin like we in here have, why do they have to classify themselves as white? I'll say it again. Until you understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else you understand will confuse you. Racism in disguise. Right. As strange as it might sound to y'all, believe it or not, there are a whole lot of black folk who believe that they must seek white approval for validation. Now, y'all ain't gonna believe this when I tell you, and I don't say this to boast. It pains me to say what I'm getting ready to say to y'all. But I have gotten more respect and comments of acknowledgement from white folk about the things that I'm saying than our own people. It's not so much that they get excited about what I'm saying, but it's as though they're saying, well, at least you got the guts to tell it like it is. That's what I get. When I do lectures, white folk come up and shake my hand. I mean, you know, that's fine, but I would really like to know that I reach my people. The other day I did a lecture at Normandy High School here. All these black students sitting in the auditorium. When we finished, you would have thought a fire was in the room. The way they jumped up and ran out. They didn't stand up to applaud. They didn't stand up to say thank you. Not one black child came to me and said, Dr. Hagins, we appreciate what you said. You know who came to me? The white teacher. And said, when can you come and talk to my students some more? Isn't that deep? Brothers and sisters, since the days of Nat Turner, the black prophet, and Denmark Vesey, to the present day, strong African leaders have been attacked and betrayed by their own people, who fear the disapproval of white folk. The program, now let me show you how this happens. I did a message here entitled Breaking the Last Bond of Slavery. The program, everybody say religious racism. Religious racism. Now y'all know what racism is, right? Well, apply that to the area of religion. Apply that to a group of people who think that their doctrine is right. And because their doctrine is right, they have the power or the right to subjugate another people who don't teach or believe like they do. I've heard people like crazy. Hagins, you know, well, child, he don't believe in Jesus. Well, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't either. But I'm not going to knock you for believing, because for over 30 years I did too. Look at the person next to you and say, the mind cannot teach what it does not know. I know many of us love Jesus, and I respect that because that's your level of awareness. But people, we got to stop attacking each other under this program that our oppressor handed to us. To whereas we think that you're of the devil because you don't agree with the doctrines that our oppressor taught to us. Something's wrong with that. This program has been designed to keep us divided, folks. We will never develop a unified movement and achieve collective power as long as we're standing on the foundation of a teaching handed to us by our enemy. I better say that again. We will never achieve collective power. We'll never be unified as long as each of us keeps standing on the foundation of a program or doctrine that was handed to us by our enemy. Now, in case you're not grabbing what I'm saying, think with me. Those who oppressed us and taught us their religion don't you ever think that now they're interested in our liberation and our knowing the truth? Now I'm going to tell you why, and just think with me. If what you're believing now is the same thing they taught you when you were a slave, then that ought to tell you something's wrong. Did that make sense to you? See, when you were a slave, they intended for you to remain a slave. So common sense ought to tell you that whatever they taught you, it wasn't for your liberation. Oh boy. Let me close this message because I'm really laboring here today. I hope y'all can hear me clearly. With the right strategy, we, as a growing black population, have the opportunity to acquire local, is that me? Yes, it is. My own people going on. Let me say that again. With the right strategy, we as a growing black population have the opportunity to acquire local, national, and ultimately international political power. However, in order to achieve this, the greatest lesson that we must learn is to discard the psychology and the philosophy and the propaganda of all other peoples and advance our own. I have the serious responsibility of being a pastor, a teacher. What's really deep is I have the responsibility of waking up a people who enjoy sleeping. That's deep. All you got to do is think about your child when you're waking them up in the morning for school. You know what you go through with them? All right, multiply that many times over, because we're talking spiritual warfare now. As a pastor, I have this responsibility. But listen, I also am not just a pastor by professional training. I am a psychologist and a therapist. And since I've been here in St. Louis, I have conducted my own study to address the social pathology which results from racism here in this city. Now, it's the same everywhere, but it's more intense here. I must use the platform that the Creator and our ancestors has placed me upon, meaning where I'm standing right now, to correct the historical and spiritual misinformation that our people have been made to believe. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Brothers and sisters, what you must understand is I spend my life researching. I know y'all don't do that. Y'all ain't in my position. That's okay. I'll do it for you. And then I'll show you where to go get the information for yourself. But I spend my life, every day of my life, researching and preparing well-documented scholarly work that will verify the level of the social, economic, political, and educational development of our people. That's what I do, folks. I see how the slave experience still influences the thinking and the behavior of our people right now, today, here in this place. But like it or not, I'm telling you, like it or not, with God and the ancestors helping me, I'm going to use every breath that I breathe and every step that I make to reverse the spiritual, emotional, and psychological damage that's been done to our people by slavery and racism. I mean that. Let me share this with you in my close. I have read the studies published by the National Institute of Mental Health. I get the publications and the journals. The National Institute of Mental Health has convinced the United States government. Now hear me now. Y'all talking about racism doesn't still exist. That's a lie. This powerful federal agency called the National Institute of Mental Health has convinced the federal government that there are, and I quote, genetic factors in blacks which influence their criminal behavior. End of quote. A study that together by Dr. Fred Goodwin, who is the former head of the National Institute of Mental Health, states, and I quote Dr. Goodman, he says, "The inner city is to be compared to a jungle." He goes on to say, quote, that people who live there have regressed to an earlier stage of evolution. End of quote. Dr. Goodwin specifically compares young black men in the inner cities of America to, and I quote him, the rhesus monkey, who only wants to kill each other, have sex, and reproduce. End of quote. Then in his report, his recommendation to the Congress of this land, did y'all hear what I said? His recommendation to the United States Congress is to, quote, use genetic and biochemical markers to identify potentially dangerous and violent black children as early as 5 years old for biological and behavioral intervention. Wake up, y'all. Did y'all hear me? Yes. I'm not talking about something that went back, y'all, in the 20s. I started off that way. I'm telling you what the National Institute of Health has recommended to the United States government. Wake up. And we're so busy to hallelujah! Woo! I didn't give you the last statement of what he said in his recommendation. He says, such intervention is to include the use of powerful drugs and even some forms of surgery on children as young as 5 years old. Brothers and sisters, regardless of what your religious ideology is, regardless of your political ideology, I don't care. Before we can rise up as a people, we must first correct the things that have led to our downfall as a people. Y'all hear what I'm saying? But we must remember, I know a lot of us are just now coming into the awareness of remembering our ancestors. But remembering our African ancestors alone is not enough to build a unified movement. We must unite ourselves around moral principles and stop judging each other because we don't agree on doctrines that our oppressor taught us in the first place. We must begin to judge each other according to our actions of righteousness, justice, truth, harmony, and right balance. Malcolm X said it this way: if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
If you're interested in including Dr. Hagins as your next keynote speaker or guest lecturer, just give us a call at the number you see on your screen, or you may write us at the address that you see on our screen. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Hotep.